Welcome, everyone. And hi, I'm Sabrina Myers from Hot Hospitality Exchange, and welcome to the first episode of the Singapore Spotlight series, which is a series of talks that I'm hosting as part of a campaign in conjunction with the Singapore Exhibition and Convention Bureau to highlight this fantastic business events destination. Our topic for discussion today is leading the way in delivering world-class events. And I am joined by my very special guests, Carrie Kwik, Bruce MacMillan, and Ong Wee Min. Now, thank you all for joining me today, ladies and gents, and thank you to the audience for joining us. We're also running a poll alongside this chat, so please do take the time to give us your answers to. There will be 3 questions we'll be running on the poll. And I'm going to get my team to put up the first poll question now. So take a time, look on the platform, fill up your questions, and we'll be sharing the results at the end of this discussion. Now, organizing an event during a pandemic is most definitely a challenge, and Singapore as a destination has certainly risen to this challenge, already having piloted a few successful business events in the last few months. Now, one of these events was the PCMA Convening Leaders 2021 event that took place last month in a hybrid event format. Strong relationships most definitely play a crucial part when it comes to planning, managing, and executing such an event. So I'm excited to discuss this in particular with my guests here today. Now, before we delve into the discussion, let's get to know our guests. Hello, Carrie. Thank you for joining us all the way from Singapore. She's got a lovely tropical background, as we can see. Very representative of Singapore. Hello. Would you
Hi,
like
Sabrina.
to kindly introduce yourself, Carrie, and tell us a little bit about your role?
Okay. Anyway, good morning to everyone in Europe, and good evening to anyone who's in Asia. I'm Carrie Kwik, Executive Director of Europe, based in London. And as you know, the Singapore Tourism Board champions the development of tourism for Singapore, part of which is also marketing Singapore as both a leisure and a business destination. And we're very pleased to be here today to represent some of our views and to be able to have the rest of our partners, PCMA and MBS, to share a bit more.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Carrie. Now we're moving on to Bruce. Hello, Bruce. Thank you for joining us all the way from the US. I know it's a tad bit early there at the moment. Could you introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about PCMA?
Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of PCMA, which means I'm part of the events, marketing, technology, and content teams, editorial content teams, which are foundational for delivering any kind of event experience. And our organization is based in 3 regions of the world. Certainly, we're headquartered in the Americas. We have a European region, and our Asia Pacific region is actually based through our managing director, Karen Bollinger, in Singapore. So this is give us lots of global coverage and also creates lots of opportunities for us as well, which Singapore hosting our convening leaders was perfect for.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Bruce. And finally, our guest, Wee Min. Hello, Wee Min, and thank you for joining us also all the way from Singapore. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Ramin. I'm the Vice President of Conventions and Exhibitions here at Marina Bay Sands. I work with 10,000 team members here in the team to create unforgettable memories for every single one of our guests.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And yes, I have been to Marina Bay Sands. It's truly a spectacular property and one that has become a very prominent symbol of Singapore indeed. So let's start our discussion and get right into it. Bruce is going to be with us just for the beginning part of this discussion. So after he leaves, if you have any questions that you particularly had for him or for PCMA, please be sure to reach out to him and connect with him on LinkedIn. Also, the details for PCMA, as well as the Singapore Exhibition and Convention Bureau, as well as Marina Bay Sands Private Limited are available here on the Hubilo platform. You just have to go to partners and you can click around, get all the relevant contact information, as well as see some wonderful videos that are been uploaded onto the platform as well. So let's start. We're just beginning our conversation with the beginning of any planning process, which is deciding on the destination and venue for the event. So Bruce, could you tell us what the deciding factors were in choosing Singapore as the destination for PCMA Convening Leaders 2021?
Well, actually, where we start our planning process is right with our audience. We undertook a significant amount of direct research and surveys to understand what the needs for our audience were. And not surprising, our audience was very uncertain about how they saw their events being planned on the go forward. We're all in a very uncertain environment. And our challenge was, how do we plan an event in a very uncertain environment? So how do we do that? We wanted to anchor our event in a place where we knew there would be certainty, and that was Singapore. And so we developed, in collaboration with WeMin and the STB, this concept of creating Singapore as our global broadcast center. And we wanted to be able to show, actually, we don't call them hybrid events, we call them omni-channel events, because what we do is we pushed out the event experience in a face-to-face. Certainly Singapore was very accommodating and able to do that without question. Right from the start, we knew we were going to have a face-to-face experience in Singapore, and the Marina Bay Sands made that possible. But we also needed to have a digital experience. And we had to have a digital experience at the very top end of what was possible. And WeMin and his team made that possible. They not only had the technology and the team, but they showed us how we could take it to the next level. And the results for our audience were off the charts. And we're very happy with that. And at the same, because we all had to take a risk. All event planners right now are in a position where there's uncertainty and they're having to evaluate the risks. So we had to show them, using our partners in Singapore, how that risk could be satisfactorily mitigated. And in fact, the results exceeded our expectations.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. And why did you decide to have the event's home base and venue at the Marina Bay Sands?
There's two reasons for that. One, as I said, we had to be able to not only have a gathering place, a remarkable gathering place, which clearly the Marina Bay Sands, that would be a magnet to bringing people, not just local, but we had people come in from the region. Even despite the pandemic, people were brought in from America. And so it was a magnet to bring people in a face-to-face, because we had to show, here's how you bring people together with some of the challenges. And WeMin's team and our partners at George P. Johnson were able to put together also our global broadcast headquarters, where we actually broadcast out, streaming across the internet. At one point, we were streaming 24 hours straight content through the technology, amazing technology setup that WeMin and his team have. And we showed some really, really leading edge things, like our CEO, Sheriff Karamat, was brought in as a hologram. And, this is what is possible.
Yeah, that's true.
We were using Convening Leaders as an experiment so that our audience all over the world could see what was possible. And the Marina Bay Sands could make that possible. So that was a great partnership.
Fantastic. And I guess here is where the strong relationship of partners comes into play. Carrie, once the destination was decided, what support did the Singapore Tourism Board, as one of the main destination partners, provide? And could you tell us a bit more about this partnership?
Sure. No, first of all, I want to thank Bruce for all his kind words, but really there's a lot of shared admiration and respect. And we certainly, have benefited from a long-standing relationship with PCMA. So we are very, very pleased that we were, able to work with them to host the Convening Leaders event in Singapore for the first time. And I think for us, really, one of the things that I guess we have been doing since last July was, already trialing out some of these pilot events, which could actually be the platform to trial some safe management measures and safety measures. And I guess this helps to give, meeting planners like PCMA some confidence in Singapore to host, to be a host destination, and for them also, to be a broadcast center. As a partner for us, it is always very critical to understand the needs of the meeting planners. And that was the same for this event, this very high profile event. We facilitate a lot of the, I guess, government related concerns. In these times where travel between different countries brings about a whole suite of a lot of complex questions, I think that's where we've also stepped in to ensure that there is a sense of commitment and assurance that we will be there to guide and navigate. I think this whole new world of testing, pre-departure, on arrival, and all the other things, contact tracing, and to actually bridge any kind of gap in people understanding what needs to be done should they hold their events in Singapore. I think the other part is actually also navigating what we have rolled out in Singapore, which is the Safe Business Events framework, which allows us in Singapore to resume our events in a safe and calibrated manner. It is not easy for first timers, in Singapore, even for us in Singapore. Things may change, they may evolve. Some things work, some things may need to constantly be reviewed, and that comes with experience. So I think that's where we worked through partnerships with partners like PCMA to ensure that the delegate experience isn't compromised, and the content ultimately is what helps to inspire. It helps to reduce of course, the obvious frictions now in terms of holding events in a COVID environment. I mean, certainly anyone who has been to a live event knows that it's not the same as before, but it's part and parcel of what might be the new norm. So that's where Singapore, STB plays a role to work with our partners like PCMA. I think for the convening leaders event, we also helped in attendance building and marketing of the event. I think this was an important piece to ensure that local tourism companies were able to send some of their staff. We also provide some grant support to help make sure that the event goes successfully. And also I think we looked at how to ensure that the delegate experience, even post-event, is taken care of through some ways to let the delegates experience the destination, even if there was somewhat of a controlled itinerary, but we would work on that aspect as well.
Fantastic. That's definitely essential, I feel, when it comes to this current climate and organizing events at this scale. And I really like the word that you mentioned, calibrate. I think it is spot on. It is about calibrating because right now, everything is changing and everything is dynamic, and it's so important to have a partner locally that is in tune with all of those changes and able to support you whenever that happens. WeMin, as the partner hotel for the event, you and your team were at the helm of executing this event, both in its virtual and in-person components. Can you tell us a bit more about the global broadcast studio at Marina Bay Sands?
Right. First, I'd like to thank PCMA and Bruce for the trust. I think for those of you who know me, you know that convening leaders has been part of my life since 2005. So it's nice. I tell people that PCMA is family and Singapore is my home. So for this year, it's very special because I brought family to my home. Now, a bit on the hybrid broadcast studio. It is designed as a live broadcast studio. So not just a recording studio, but a live broadcast studio. It harnesses technology such as immersive screens, holographic presence, which Sharif appeared on, and mixed reality to bring storytelling and content delivery to a whole new level. But it was important to note that the studio was actually conceptualized before COVID. In maybe November, December of 2019, I lost account of the year. A group of us sat down and we looked at in what we term as small reimagined teams, and we looked at what the future of our industry would hold, both in hotel, F&B, and of course in business events. And we looked at parallel industries. We looked at e-gaming, and we looked at how they use e-gaming as industry use computer graphics CG to capture the imagination of a community. We looked at sports and how they use the live broadcasting of sports event to build brand loyalty, and most importantly, news broadcasting, something very mundane in the past, and how live news broadcasting brought news broadcasting to a whole new level. So collectively, this allowed us to reimagine what the future of our industry would be. In fact, the studio has its roots in CL, in a little fact known to very little people. Yeah. In CL20 in San Francisco, a group of us sat down with thought leaders, Bruce, Sharif, a couple of friends as well, and we tested the concept of a hybrid broadcast studio with these thought leaders. And with their input, we were able to fine-tune the product and deliver a cutting-edge platform for our industry. And of course, to be fair, COVID was a great fast-forward button that came along and pushed a 3-year project into a 3-month execution. Yeah. And then, of course, the rest, they say, is history.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And for those of you who are watching, if you want to find out more about the Global Broadcast Studio and Center at Marina Bay Sands, just visit their website, head to the meetings part of the website, and you will have it right there, and you'll be able to explore it further. And of course, contact Women to find out more information on that. It was the world's first global broadcast studio for events. So it's definitely an incredible feat that has been successfully met. Now, Bruce, as the organizer and the client, I guess my question is twofold here. What were your biggest concerns about organizing an event in this climate? And what was the experience like for PCMA with having to pivot to this particular hybrid format, albeit you have been practicing the hybrid format in certain percentages over the last 10 years or so? How was the process different from the usual planning approach to convening leaders?
Well, again, we start with our audience. And we knew that our audience was going to be, typically we would have had 90 to 92% of the audience in the room. Mm-hmm. This time we had over 22% of the audience, or sorry, we only had 20% of the audience, or less than 20% of the audience in the room. And we had, in the 80 to 90% of the audience in a virtual world. So we had to understand what that meant. And at the same time, we had over 22% of the audience that was not from the United States. So it was a very much more of a global audience, which meant we had to deal with multiple time zones. We had to deal with multiple cultures and delivery mechanisms. So we had this very vast global audience. And that was different than we'd ever focused on before. And that's not unlike what a lot of our audience is dealing with. Through virtual, they have a much broader global reach. So we had to develop engagement mechanisms and connection mechanisms virtually that have to replace those sort of serendipitous gatherings. And that was a challenge because we are, as an audience, we are very face-to-face human connection type of experience. So we had to try to replicate or create some kind of outlet for that online. The good news, the really good news, is our engagements were up well over 140%.
Fabulous.
Whether it's social media, whether it's web visits, the engagements were off the charts as a result of this. I will say that I don't think there's any technology out there that's quite going to replace, as we men talked about what we did in San Francisco last year, sitting in a room and innovating. There's no technology that can replace that. But what we can do is find, small chunks to be able to do that. And one of the areas we did that was in something we called our conversation thought starters, which were small group gatherings. We had to keep adding them every day because they were always sold out. People still wanted to get together in small groups. But we, initially that was we had 5 or 10 at a time. We were getting up to 20, 25 at a time to be able to capture people's interest in connecting. So that was a challenge that we had to try to understand because we'd never done it before. And I guess, the other thing is every day, every event is a broadcast event. We very much thought about ourselves as a TV media outlet, and we had to be listening, watching all the chats go down the side, and try to understand what their feedback was. And I will say, for the most part, it worked very well. I know on site, the satisfaction levels by the participants on site at the Marina Bay Sands in Singapore were in the high 90s, which is fantastic. And our online, through our Juno platform, we were in the high to mid 80s who either were satisfied or highly satisfied with their experience, which for a first time through, we were thrilled with. And we're going to continue to iterate. We're continuing to learn. We're going through all the data that we have, because I think we have a model that it was brought to us by Singapore that we can continue to build on. But it is those relationships that, we're always in contact with Wee Min and his team. And how do we keep building? Where do we go from here? And that's what's keeping us up at night right now.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Bruce. And Carrie, how do you address the concerns that event planners and clients such as PCMA have, and how does the SECB support event planners in the planning phase of the process in terms of what are you doing additionally now due to the current climate and restrictions in place?
Yeah, well, I think in the current environment, we know that the key priority is really the health and safety, of delegates. I think that's everyone's concern, both from the meeting planner to the host and the venue. So the safety is always paramount. Safety of delegates, safety of the employees of the venue and this tourism workers. And so we have been trying to leverage a lot of our technological infrastructure, our support frameworks and skills, across the island, to make sure that some of these are also pivoting towards tourism's needs during COVID. So technology companies are now being providers and using the tourism as a new landscape for them to take a look at, and the applications of technologies are now being seen in real life situations. So STB plays a role to bridge some of these relationships to help in the reopening efforts. And then I think at an event level, obviously, attendees at events such as those at convening leaders, there is a very structured way of ensuring safety is taken care of, from pre-event testing, on all the days of the events. So in this case, both days of the events, and implementing strong safety protocols, throughout, from time of arrival at the airport all the way to departure. There are a lot of details that we work with together with the venue partners, with the tour operators and the transportation companies, to ensure that there is a way to manage the risks as much as possible using technology. For example, we rolled out digital guides and contactless registration for this event. And so you slowly start to innovate and you reimagine and redesign the delegate experience. And that's part of what we are currently doing every time we work on a new event.
I love that. Reimagine and redesign. Absolutely. Those are brilliant words. And I wanted to ask, I attended the event virtually this year, as did many other international attendees. And there was a live in-person component that was organized at the Marina Bay Sands Hotel. So Wee Min, for the in-person part of this event, I can imagine that the biggest concern was health and safety, as Carrie's just mentioned. Could you tell us about how this was managed by the hotel during the event in terms of checks and distancing and other such key components and measures that you put into place?
I think to understand that, we need to first take a step back and look at Singapore. Singapore has adopted a very safe-faced and very cautious approach to reopening the industry. So it's from day one, since the industry was reopened, it was a very collaborative partnership between us and the authorities, Singapore Tourism Board. We tested a lot of things together, and some things worked in the first pilot, some things didn't, and we learned along the way. So it's a bit of a running strategy, a very safe and calibrated running strategy, where we were able to, very quickly bring in best practices. So, and with reference to CL, competing leaders, it was again a very big and very important collaborative partnership with Bruce and his team. Tony and I, the VP of meetings, for PCMA, we spoke many times, just to reassure. It's a lot of hand-holding, because for a lot of us, a lot of our clients, it is the step into the big unknown. What does testing really mean? How will my delegate really feel? We've done it a few times, and we're also learning. So from perspective of the client and the delegates, it's the big unknown. So it's a lot of trust, a lot of hand-holding, and it's a lot of working out of the delegate journeys to enhance the various touch points. So with reference to CL, we did antigen tests for every single one of our delegates, for 2 times for both of the event days. There was distance set up, 50 people to a zone, as a matter of risk mitigation, 5 persons to a table, so that when you sit around a 6-feet table, it's exactly 1 meter apart. 3 meters between zones, and then 6 meters from front of stage. So a lot of distance drawings, just to make sure everything fit within the place. And of course, a good mention must be made to Josh B. Johnson, which helped us reimagine that delegate experience, and how we could essentially how we could enhance delegate touch points in a situation where it could very easily be a very sterile environment, where people go in for tests. How we could mitigate waiting times, how we could drive engagement to something as simple as antigen tests. So we did small little storyboards, talking points, antigen test, what it is, 0.2 cm, into your nose, etc. Non-intrusive, blah blah blah, and we all had some fun doing that. The MBS team then worked with Singapore Tourism Board to deploy safe distancing ambassadors, basically hospitality ambassadors, to make sure that people don't get too excited. After all, this is the first time the global industry is meeting, in this post-COVID world, or this COVID world. So to make sure that, okay, a meter apart, mask on, when you're not having F&B. And looking back now, the biggest concern that we had, we thought it was health and safety. The biggest concern that we had at the end of the day wasn't health and safety, because it is the new baseline. It is the new baseline. It is not it's not a negotiable consideration. Yes. It is a baseline. Yeah. And now, and how we could then collectively with PCMA, with STB, create unforgettable memories, in this new environment, through delegate flows, through queue, how to manage queues, for example. No one waited more than 1.5 minutes in a queue. How we drive engagement, and how we could enable people to connect with each other in a totally different way. I quote our Minister of Trade when he was talking in the first ever pilot event. Same, but slightly different.
I love that term. It's
a different way.
Yes.
Right.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Raymond. That all sounds so fantastic, and it gives everyone that's watching that has questions about that specific process, because we all hear different terminology and we read it, but it's so important to really understand the inner workings of it, and how as a supplier and as a venue you are working together with the client step by step in that process, not just for the organizing team, but also for the event attendees who are coming to the event. What will that experience be like for them, and how can you make that an easier process? So I've just launched our second poll question. We did already launch our first poll question. So those of you, please take the time to answer the polls. We'll be sharing the results at the end of the session. I know Bruce is going to be leaving us shortly, so I wanted to pose my last question to Bruce. What was a key takeaway from this PCMA Convening Leaders event for you?
I want to go back to, I think, something that everybody's touched on is the importance of the relationships. Because we have worked with Singapore and the STB and MacMillan and his team over a number of years. It didn't just start, as COVID was happening. It's a relationship that was built over a number of years. And they understood what we needed to have in terms of our business outcomes. And they understood the challenges, and we just talked about them, but they understood the outcomes that we needed to have. We needed to be able to show to our audience how, despite the pandemic, how safety could be delivered on site. And if you've been to Singapore, and as I agree with MacMillan, that is table stakes. Safety of your attendees is table stakes. And Singapore is very conscious about how to ensure a safe experience for everybody. But beyond that, they understood what our business outcomes. We needed to show how a digital environment could come together with a face-to-face environment and be shared around the world. That is a brand new in a lot of ways. And they knew that's what we wanted to do, and we were able to showcase that. So that was really important, and that's only something that gets built through relationships. And if you have an opportunity to have somebody and strike up, if you have a business need, strike up a conversation with somebody from Marina Bay Sands or STB, you will find that they understand what your desired business outcomes are. And not everybody does that. And so that accelerated our ability to turn something around very quickly in a very uncertain environment. That made it work so much better. And we're still learning along the way. So I'll close with that. And again, I want to publicly thank the STB and MacMillan and his team for all that they did to make Commuting Leaders so successful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bruce. That's so kind and that's so wonderful to hear. And yes, at the end of the day, it is all about relationship and a strong one at that. And we thank you for your time, Bruce, and joining us today. And yeah, until the next time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Bruce.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So basically now let's move on to innovation. So innovation and reimagining experiences has definitely been at the forefront of returning to events in Singapore. So on that note, Carrie, can you tell us a bit more about Safe Management Measures, SMM, and Safe Itineraries, which are two initiatives that Singapore currently has in place?
Well, as some of you may be aware, Singapore is currently in the third phase of our reopening, which means that many of our tourism partners, be it the hotels or the attractions, the retail and the dining businesses, they have reopened, but they are operating under quite different conditions. The standards are very rigorous in terms of hygiene, in terms of safe distancing, and in terms of what the restaurants are doing to leverage on technology as well for contactless ways of integrating. So, for example, menu cards that are now in certain restaurants are actually a QR code that you scan, and then you get you get the menu in that restaurant. So under the Safe Management Measures, or we call them SMM for short, framework, these national guidelines have been developed, and it's quite tourism sector specific. So there are quite detailed set of guidelines if you are in, you're an attraction or whether you're a hotel, and these would touch on areas like capacity limits, safe distancing, your minimum 1 meter, for example, and also the hygiene practices. And that's something that has been the cornerstone of how we have reopened. And the Safe Business Events framework that is guiding the business events piece was established, under this broader framework to achieve the same objectives. So the event organizers must show how they can implement the SMM measures in order to get approval for pilot events. And this has been important. So as you know now, we from around last October, the Singapore government announced that we could get applications for organizing events of up to 250 people at the point in time. And for I guess certain pilots, they might be open to even higher numbers. And it's a step-by-step process. It's a gradual, very gradual reopening that will help us to I guess refine things that are being put in place slowly. And we call it a test and learn approach. That's what we say. With every pilot, you learn new things, you review existing things to see whether or not you can improve them further. So it really is a process. It's a journey. So that's the safe management approach. Most importantly, this framework was actually developed with strong industry consultation. I think Women had mentioned, how the government and the tourism players have actually, since COVID hit, been involved in many different kinds of discussions. So private and public sector has been working very closely in terms of, making sure that policy decisions are not taken in a vacuum without getting feedback from our industry partners. And these things are developed and aligned to international best practices as well. So I think that's one of the things that you were asking about. I think you also asked about the
safe itineraries.
Safe itineraries, yes. So safe itineraries is the other cornerstone of how we are looking at the resumption of tourism, in Singapore. And safe itineraries is something that cuts across both, I guess for now it's our business events and the business delegates, but in time it will be something that is also broadened to all visitors in Singapore potentially. And it is how we are trialing first with MICE delegates, the ability to bring people through a Singapore, itinerary, a tour itinerary outside of the actual business event, outside of the MICE hall, to showcase to them a little bit of the destination. It does mean a lot of planning, because it means that we are looking at areas of a controlled itinerary, more because of the need for contact tracing. In case there are any positive cases that are, flagged out eventually, and groups follow an itinerary that is pre-arranged and in cohorts. Again, because then it helps us to aid contact tracing efforts if necessary. But this is something that people are slowly getting used to. It's not easy to lose some of that spontaneity, to be very honest, right? But I think it's something that we feel it's for now, it helps to at least allow people things to be done outside of just the hotel venue or the MICE venue.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say, because it's there's that part of it with the business event side of things, but the safe itineraries allows you to envision what you can organize, additionally outside of the actual events, right? So if you wanted to incorporate the more, I would say, incentive style or team building style activities, how could you safely facilitate that with local partners? So I think it's great to give event planners an idea of that. And I know that there's a great video on the Hubilo platform, as well as on the Visit Singapore business page on LinkedIn. You can check out the video and see exactly what Carrie is talking about when she mentions safe itineraries. They give great video footage of taking smaller groups of event attendees and doing events and experiences throughout Singapore that are authentically Singaporean, but they're reimagined, as I like to call it. And now let's move on to the hybrid model. Now the hybrid model is so much more complex, as you're managing two very different experiences for two different attendee types. So this is, for me, and I guess for a lot of the audience out there, interesting to know from Women as the venue and the hotel partner, what was it like to manage a virtual event alongside an in-person event simultaneously at the same time?
It is very interesting. It is a humbling experience. We in a normal pre-COVID world, we are the home of more than 3,600 events a year.
Wow.
We have got lots of experience in designing, conceptualizing, executing in-person touchpoints. Hybrid event is slightly different. It's like running two events. I borrow a quote from one of my good friends, who is a very established meeting planner. Running a hybrid event is like having two trains in the same train station setting off at the same time. They don't meet.
Yeah.
Right, but they head towards the same destination. They share the same content, and the passengers on both train and have two different sets of experiences. And as they pull up to the next platform, it's where you try to bridge that experience through, how you could bring the hybrid, the virtual audience closer to the face-to-face audience, because the face-to-face audience has the benefit of five senses. Whereas the hybrid audience only had sight and sound. So we have to think of ways to engage them in a totally different way, and to ensure that they have a great experience at the end of the day. They receive the same great content, and hopefully the content delivered in a very, very different manner. To help us with that, we work with PCMA. PT Bruce is not with us now. With PCMA to upskill more than 50 of our client-facing team members with PCMA's digital event strategies accreditation. This is to enable and arm the people, the team, with the necessary skill sets and knowledge to engage our clients and delegates in conversations that we never had before. So it's an ongoing journey, ongoing learn and test and learn journey. I take a quote from Carrie, to see how we could collectively, as a group, as an industry, redefine, reimagine, and new experiences for the industry collectively.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think that's brilliant that the PCMA facilitated the digital event strategist qualifications and teachings. I think that is definitely something essential for any event planner that is moving into that stage of having to organize a virtual event or even a hybrid event that has the virtual component. To have that education and that information is valuable, because then they know exactly what questions they need to be asking, both from a tech side as well as from the actual event attendee experience side. So that's brilliant to know. And yes, PCMA does offer a digital event strategist certification. If you want to find out more about that on the Hubilo platform, if you go to partners, click on PCMA, you'll be able to click through their website to find out more about that. So, and in this context, Carrie, one of the innovative measures have been digital enablers. Can you explain that term, and also what does it mean in relation to events?
Okay. Well, I guess it's a broad term that we use, to capture the pivoting of some of the ways that we hold events in Singapore. And I think I earlier mentioned things like digital guides, contactless registration for delegates of convening leaders. That was one aspect of it. And it's important because I think, most of us think that these will be something that becomes the new norm and really quite mainstream in future. Another thing that we do use as an example is also the application that was developed for contact tracing called Trace Together. This has actually, the adoption of it is very important, because the more people are adopting this, both locals as well as our overseas guests, it allows us to actually support national contact tracing efforts, and it allows the reopening of the economy, and allows the flow of people in public places again, and so that is something as well that has impacted our business events. Other things that are being trialed are things such as temperature scanning, before you go into any venue. In fact, several times if you go into a huge venue like Marina Bay Sands. And contactless badge printing, And even, we have also looked at ways to trial a web portal to allow delegates to actually do things that are more self-service in nature, and to do checks even pre-arrival in Singapore, to look at their events planning and details of what kind of COVID tests they might have to do depending on which country they come from. So those are some of the little steps in using, I guess, technology as an enabler.
And this is probably a question, I've had a few people ask me this question, and they're about the very famous robot dogs that have been wandering around Singapore. Have these been being used in events? Have they been used in Marina Bay Sands, for example? Or is this something that
we may
they
take
can
that
use?
question?
Because that would be brilliant to know.
Have we been in Marina Bay Sands? I'm not sure we've been.
Not yet, not yet. But we're looking at how we could incorporate that. Again, that it is not about the technology, it's about the experience and how we augment that technology to ensure that the data experience is optimal.
Because watching it on videos has been brilliant. Yeah, and so to see, or at least for event planners to have sort of like an innovative option to do something that could be quirky for their event would definitely be something really interesting to look into and facilitate.
I would like one. I would like one. That's such a cool point.
I'm not sure about the robot dogs, but we do have the robots, that are, in Changi Airport, for example, and again,
these are the disinfecting robots that there are, right? They're going around disinfecting all the stations and the actual spaces within the facilities, right? Yeah, I've seen those as well.
So I think it goes back to the question of how do we ensure that even as we maintain extremely high standards of, hygiene and safety, that the experience of the end customer, the delegate, isn't compromised, and it is because of innovation that you can recognize these differences, and hopefully it does sometimes it seems very, very I guess complicated now to actually travel and to go to somewhere to outside of your own home, but there are also new experiences that hopefully somewhat do bring a smile as well, because people no matter what, I think, do still enjoy the physical interaction of live meetings in the end. And it's an art, in terms of walking this line of maintaining those high standards, correct, and balancing, correct, the customer experience.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Carrie. We've got some great questions coming in, actually. So let's see. This is a question. Are face-to-face events allowed within Singapore, as at the moment travel from the UK is not allowed? I believe they are allowed at the moment, right? Is there a restriction?
Yes. So face-to-face events such as the convening leaders are part of a pilot trial of business events that of course, by working closely with the meeting planners, we are assured that they will meet the safe management measures that are very important in our resumption of events under the Safe Business Events Framework. So one of the first international events that we hosted was last November, called Travel Revive. We had about 1,000 people on site. About 65 were from overseas, and that allowed us to kick off, some of these efforts in terms of trialing the technology and the safety measures. That was also held at Marina Bay Sands. Then we also had, the Milliken event. We also had, of course, now PCMA convening leaders. So events can happen. Of course, we have also announced recently, very happily, that we are hosting the World Economic Forum, now pushed back to August. But every event is very different, and I must caveat that it's not like all events are suddenly going to be able to come to Singapore so quickly. Eventually, of course, we would love to have more events in our calendar. But the pace and the timing would also be dependent on the conversations that we can have with the event organizers and meeting planners, and working with the venue partners like MBS, because each event is unique at this point in time with COVID. There's a lot more discussion that needs to be done before we can commit. But yes, we are open for business. Yes, we are allowed to get applications of events that are about at least 250 for a start, and even maybe higher depending on the needs and the reasons. But yes, you're right. Travel borders are still somewhat not open in the same way, and for the UK, there are still some restrictions in place. But we are prepared to see how we can help to bring in delegates if it is for special cases.
Fantastic. Thank you, Carrie. Now I have a question for women from the audience. With the new hybrid studio proving to be a massive success with PCMA, Convening Leaders and Travel Revive, for example, in mind, has this resulted in an increase of virtual and hybrid events heading to Singapore? And what impact has this had on attracting future events?
Short answer to that is yes. We recently calculated, I think we are working on, since we opened a studio, we have been working on maybe about 150, 200 virtual event leads with our clients and our partners, some of which have used us for their face-to-face events, some haven't before, allowed us to build new relationships. I think the elephant in the room is where will hybrid events be in the future when it is a post-COVID situation. We firmly believe that in the past, we did 3,600 successful face-to-face events. The post-COVID world, we will host 3,600 successful face-to-face events paired with an equally successful virtual component launched in a hybrid format. I like the way Bruce said it. It's not a hybrid event, it's an omni-channel event, because that in itself tells us that the future of where industry would be. It allows us now to have the capability to reach our audience, not just 5 days a year when they meet face-to-face, 365 days a year in a way that we have never done before as an industry. So the future is bright, so as to say.
Fabulous. I love hearing that. And
I think if I may also add on to your question, your earlier question, and also what Renan mentioned about hybrid events, I think Singapore is looking or the STB is looking at how we can also provide support through our Be in Singapore financial grant scheme for events, including hybrid events. I think we recognize that it will become a new norm. And we are prepared to see how we can help event planners to also, bring this to Singapore, so that as long as there is, some, physical and virtual element, it's still something that as a, exhibition and convention bureau, we would be happy to have discussions. Some of our grant schemes are also supporting in non-financial ways, where we might also help to provide experiences, bespoke experiences to certain eligible groups. We call that our Inspire program. We also have SNAP, which is another program with the support of about 5 to 6 other Singapore partners like the Changi Airport Group, Singapore Airlines, JetKey, Sentosa, to actually work together to provide, more incentives for groups to come to Singapore and choose Singapore as a destination.
I think that's interesting what you just mentioned, Carrie, because one of the questions, for example, is a new meetings concept in Singapore has launched with a meeting bubble called Connect at Changi. That's right. At the Sing Expo meeting behind airtight glass. Now, are other venues like Marina Bay Sands, for example, looking at this concept? And do you see this as a short-term fix or something that is going to progressively be used moving forward?
Since the industry reopened, we have always been working very closely with all the stakeholders, clients especially, in an audience-centric approach towards safe meetings. As I said, mentioned just now, health and safety is not a USP, it is a new baseline. And we constantly try to innovate how we could better enable and empower our clients to meet in a very safe and a very secure manner. So it might be behind plexiglass one day, it might be behind a newly designed robotic sanitized rooms the next day. The future is bright because innovation never stands still.
Fabulous. I love that. Brilliant. Thank you, Wee Min. And we're taking one last question from the audience, unless I get any more. This is a question from Bill. The AEO believe that 87% of people do more business face-to-face. How do you allow people to interact with each other? Are you using any technology? This is a question, perhaps probably for Wee Min with the venue.
Yes, while immersive technologies enable our clients to tell the story in a different way, the ability to monetize and commercialize it by enabling connections is totally different. So we still work very, very closely with our clients to try to reimagine how to bring people closer together through innovative platforms. For example, PCMA was run on a platform that's AI-enabled called Juno. That enable people to connect and also just like how Netflix does, you choose a horror film, the next 10 films that come out as horror films recommendation. So since you're connected with women, you might like to connect with Bruce, Carrie, and people with similar interests. It's technologies like this no longer the exception, they're becoming the norm to enable people with like-minded interests to connect with each other, to form small little tribes, and to explore and to co-create content together in different ways.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Wee Min, for that. And with that, I would like to announce the answers from, or the results of the polls. So if my team at Hubilo could show the results to our audience, and I will let everyone know. So this first question we asked, and this will be obviously very interesting to Wee Min and Carrie as well, and Bruce, who's not with us. Are hybrid events part of your event strategy for this year and onward into 2022? 73.3% of the audience said yes, 6.7% said no, and 20% said maybe. So that's interesting. The second question and poll was, when do you see international in-person events returning? The 25% said end of 2021. Early to mid 2022 is 43.8%. That was the largest majority. Mid to late 2022 was 31.3%, and 2023 onwards was 0. So people are definitely positive, and they're hoping to return to international in-person events sooner than expected, which is a great insight from the audience, and definitely a positive one for us. And number 3, our third poll was, what support from CVBs is most important to your work as we progress through the pandemic? 16.7% said updates on safety information. 58.3%, which was the largest majority, said adjusted support packages for hybrid events. And regular in-market engagements was 25%. So thank you everyone in the audience for giving us your answers. As we can see, we're all very positive. We're all very anxious to get back to meeting absolutely in person, but also marrying technology and in real life experiences the best way possible, which Singapore has been doing so brilliantly, piloting in all their business events in the last few months. So we're almost out of time. We've got 2 minutes left. I guess I'm going to end with a question for both of you. Now, Carrie, I'll start with you. Speaking on behalf of the destination, why was this such an important event for Singapore?
MICE as a sector is very important for Singapore. The number of jobs that it supports, almost 34,000 direct and indirect jobs, and MICE industry contributes about 0.8% to our GDP. So as an economic driving activity, it's very important. So hosting an event, a high-profile event like convening leaders and working with a partner like PCMA as well as MBS allowed us to further our ambitions of trialing our safe management measures in a manner where we had a like-minded partner to actually try and innovate new things that would ensure that the customer experience is not compromised, and is really from that goal in mind to develop a new norm for all our industry to learn. And I think that was one of the key reasons why we were very, very happy to be able to be part of this event and work with PCMA.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Carrie. And Wee Min, with PCMA Convening Leaders 2021 being successfully delivered, would you see this event as a benchmark for how events industry can create perspective and hope beyond COVID in returning to events?
120%, definitely. This event, this test bed event, which we tested and we worked on together with STB and PCMA, is so important because it allowed us. Bruce said it best. It is a huge test bed. It's a huge test for the whole industry, and I think collectively we learned new things that we could test and learn together, and the industry could implement for the events that we are collectively running in our own sphere.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Wee Min. And thank you, both of you, for being my guests today in this discussion, and to Bruce as well, who couldn't stay with us the long stretch. But we are so lucky to have had you and sharing your experiences and your insight today. I'd like to thank our audience for joining us today as well. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our discussion and engage with us in the chat with your comments and questions. There are some great videos to watch, as well as relevant contact details for anyone that you'd like to contact within those organizations for your requests for further information or briefs to send through. Now, if you have any questions that you didn't manage to ask any of us, please feel free to connect with Wee Min and Carrie and Bruce on LinkedIn or any other social media platforms, or the contact details given here. This session will also be posted onto LinkedIn later this week. So those of you who are unable to join us in this discussion, you'll be able to catch the replay on LinkedIn and drop your comments and questions in the comments section there as well. And I'll do my best to make sure that they're answered and by the right experienced professionals and representatives from Singapore. So I'm Marina Myers from Hot Hospitality Exchange. Be sure to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn to stay tuned to my posts on Singapore as your go-to business events destination. Thank you all for joining me today. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Wee Min. And thank you,
Sabrina.
Everyone. Take care. Have a wonderful afternoon. Bye.
Bye-bye.